What's up, everybody? Dan Kenobi here for John Boy Boxing and Inside Boxing Live, and I'm here to talk about the failed negotiations of another big fight in boxing. This time, one of the biggest fights in the non-heavyweight division you can make. It's Terence Crawford and it's Errol Spence. It's not happening. It's reported on Thursday night, late Thursday night, that Terence Crawford has struck a deal to fight David Avesyan in his hometown of Nebraska on a unknown pay-per-view platform sometime in December. This obviously puts Spence fight in great peril. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about who is to blame. I want to talk about, is there any side to blame, what this means for boxing, which both fighters are going to do next. But I'm going to be honest, like, I just woke up and this is very raw. Read the Eidick article, read the Coppinger article. I haven't even had my coffee yet, but I wanted to sit down and put something out there into the universe, my thoughts, my feelings, more than just a 1-minute video I put out last night when I was broken. I was a broken man last night. My Yankees lost. I got news that Spence Crawford is probably done. Maybe it gets rekindled next year. Who knows at this point? But after reading the Keith Eidick article, after reading the Mike Coppinger story, I'm not surprised. Both sides are blaming the other side. Listen, a ton of people are going to place blame. People love to place blame on when things go wrong. Oh, this is Bud Crawford's reason why this isn't happening. Because if you go to his tweets, he tweeted out his whole resume, everything he's accomplished. I don't need Errol Spence. Bud has said that for years. I don't need an Errol Spence fight for me to be a Hall of Famer. I don't need an Errol Spence fight. I'm already pound for pound #1. I'm going to the Hall of Fame, all that and the other. Then you have Errol Spence's side, who is represented by Al Heyman and the PBC. PBC have made some big fights. PBC have not made some big fights. They've made more big fights than they have not made big fights. But there was reporting from Mike Coppinger a few months back, or a few weeks back, that there were some clauses in this contract that were not friendly towards the Terence Crawford side. You can go back and look it up. Not being able to see all the money that was involved in the fight, getting a flat rate, things that Terence Crawford didn't like, and Terence Crawford has negotiated tons of times. I'm never going to fault a fighter. If they're not comfortable with the contract, they shouldn't sign it, and they shouldn't go through with it. They're the ones going into the ring and taking punishment for our entertainment. So that's one side of the story. That's both sides of the story, actually. I said yesterday that both sides are to blame in this. And I got people throwing Trump videos at me. I got people saying, get the F out of here. This is clearly Bud's side. Whatever. People are going to make their decisions and choose sides, how they choose sides. Boxing world, just like the political world in the United States, very divided. There are people that love the PBC and walk in lockstep with everything they do. And there are a lot of people out there that think that Terence Crawford negotiated in bad faith. You can make a case for that as well. You know, like why you said you were negotiating with Errol Spence, and then all of a sudden a David Avesyan fight pops up the same day. So you were negotiating with Avesyan and you were also negotiating with Spence. You can look at that as a fighter keeping his options open, or you can look at that as a fighter negotiating in bad faith. I'm laying out all the options here for you to make a decision and you to decide how this fight didn't happen when all signs were pointing to it was happening. November 19th, I was told by an employee, a high-ranking employee of PBC. So how did this fall apart so quickly? How did this fall apart when Terence Crawford is a free agent, Errol Spence fights for PBC, they own all the belts, they're all the belt holders at 147. This fight didn't happen in November. Okay, we'll do it in February 4th, the week before the Super Bowl. That's what Dan Rayfield reported just yesterday in the afternoon. So fans were like, you know what? Like, okay, you don't get it in November. You know, if it doesn't happen in 2022, I'm going to be pretty upset, but maybe we'll get it Super Bowl weekend. And then, you know, it's only a few more months from November, and it's not exactly, we're not that pissed off. We're already pissed off, boxing fans. But now this is a slap in the face. Boxing fans are some of the most mistreated fans in all of sports. They're stepped on. They are taken advantage of. The biggest fights rarely happen. The biggest fights rarely happen at the right time. Spence Crawford was going to happen at the right time. Just about. With Crawford being 35, but still looking good off that win off of Sean Porter. A lot of people have him as the #1 boxer, pound for pound in the world. Errol Spence, look what he did to your Dennis Ugas, fully back from the car crash at the, I would say, just about the tail end of his prime. Crawford, you can say he's on the tail end of the prime, but still, up there. So this fight, honestly, it was a fight that was big appetite for it. And it was going to be damn good inside of the ring. It's a freaking shame that it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen at this point. Spence is talking about going up to 154 pounds. He's talked about that forever. He's talked about that, after I fight Crawford, I'm going to go up to 154. Spence has laid out his plans for a long time now. I'm going to get 3 belts, and I'm going to fight Terence Crawford. I'm going to fight Danny Garcia. I'm going to fight, Terence Crawford. I'm going to collect all the belts. Then I'm going to go to 154. Errol Spence, when he says he's going to do something, he usually does it. That's what makes this even harder to understand, is that Spence really wanted to fight. I believe that. I think both these fighters really wanted to fight. Money gets in the way. Ego gets in the way. Promoters negotiating. But you think with everything that was here, 2 fighters that want it, no network obstacles, which is always the toughest part of a negotiation, and it still doesn't happen. It's a kick in the balls to boxing fans. I'm very passionate boxing, I wouldn't say fan, because I'm in the media. I love boxing. I want the sport to thrive. If the sport thrives, I thrive, because I literally work in boxing media. It's a very scary thing to depend on the health of a sport that the promoters are constantly killing it. The fighters are constantly killing it. They don't take care of the health of the sport. And I'm on the other end, trying to make a living off the sport. It's very, very scary. But if you look at boxing scene, Terence Crawford, this is the headline, to fight David Avesyan on December 10th in Omaha, Nebraska. And you look at some of the quotes that are in there, and both sides pointing the blame at one another. Errol Spence saying, you know what, he was negotiating in bad faith, and he never wanted to fight. He had a fight up his sleeve, and he never was really serious about making this fight. Then you look over, Errol Spence on Terence Crawford fighting David Avesyan next. I don't know who he is. Everybody sees now who is holding the fight up. I got to talk to my manager, and I already told him I'm at this weight too long. I don't know. I might be moving up. All right, great. So we get this fight at 154 pounds. When? The whole point of this and a big allure of this fight was to get them at 147 where they're at their best, undisputed, all that, bells and whistles. Who cares sometimes, but sometimes it means something. So now Spence goes up to 154 potentially. Fights, one of the many, many really good fighters at 154. Is it going to be Jermell Charlo? He's a stablemate of his. Jermell Charlo is fighting Tim Tszyu in January. So Spence versus the winner of Tszyu Charlo in, I don't know, May, June of next year. There are other names at 154 that Spence could fight and wait around, but they're not as big as Terence Crawford. He can stick at 147. He has mandatories everywhere. Boots, Virgil Ortiz, Emmanuel Stanionis, Keith Thurman wants a crack at him. There are plenty of options for him in the PBC world or just outside of it for Errol Spence. So I'm curious to see. That's another reason I thought these two should fight each other, because there are these young guns knocking on the doorstep, mandatory-wise, skill-wise, wanting to fight them. If you're Errol Spence, fighting a Boots right now, you might not win, number one, and you're not going to make close to the money you're going to make for a Terence Crawford fight. Same thing with fighting a Virgil Ortiz. He could beat Keith Thurman, but it still won't be the same amount of money. Same thing for Crawford. He has a title too. Boots Ennis, Virgil Ortiz are all coming for him. Those aren't exactly winnable fights for Terence Crawford. So take the chance, lose to Spence, who's one of the best fighters in the world, make probably the highest payday of your career. No, we're going to do the third option. Is I'm going to fight David Avesyan in my hometown. I'm not going to fight Errol Spence. I'm going to blame this, that, and the others. This is why I think both sides should be taking some of the blame here. I know that's lame. You might say, oh, he's taking both sides. He's playing both sides this. We don't know what's going on in those negotiations. But when two fighters get in a room, they usually make it happen. Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather made it happen. Some of the biggest fights in boxing where there was so many obstacles made it happen. This isn't even on that level. This isn't a mega fight. This isn't a 1 million home pay-per-view. They think it is. It's not. This fight would have done okay. This fight would have done like 600,000 buys. And you tell me you can't get it done? Both sides should be very embarrassed by this. Terence Crawford side, whoever represents him now, because I don't even know who it is. PBC side, who had everything for this fight to make it happen, to facilitate this fight, didn't get it done. Plain and simple. Fight's not happening. And 20 years from now, when you look back on this saga and why Spence Crawford wasn't made, you're not going to remember who was to blame. You're going to remember that it just didn't happen. And that's really sad because it's a really good fight. And it's just a kick in the nuts to boxing. Fury, Joshua teased us. A lot of people thought it wasn't going to happen right from the start. I was like, you know what? I'm not falling into this trap just yet. And eventually, I fell into it. And then they pulled the plug from us on Fury, Joshua. Now the same thing's happening to Spence Crawford, but a way longer tease. This fight's been teased since 2018. Just when you think you're going to get it, November 19th, pull the plug from you. It's absolutely wild that Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia could be the saving grace, could be the savior. Those two should be extra motivated. Their team should be extra motivated to make a fight before the end of this year. It is a commercial pay-per-view hit. There are no big fights on the schedule. There is a massive void for a commercial mega fight. And it's it. The lane is wide open. The runway is wide open for Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia, a fight that I think could do over 1 million pay-per-views. That should be treated like a mega fight. But do I get my hopes up again? That's the thing. Do I get my hopes up? Do you as a boxing fan get your hopes up? I don't blame you if you don't want to believe that any fight happens. Every time, I'm a very positive guy on Twitter and in the boxing world. Optimist. People say it's a fault of mine. I'll put out these dream fights that I hope happen this year. Or these, let's get this fight going, let's get that fight going. And the majority of the comments are never gonna happen, not gonna happen. These fights are never gonna happen. Why are you doing this? And I'm like, oh man, those are such negative people. And it's so lame to see that over and over. But now I understand why. Like, what is telling you that these fights are going to happen? But I remain positive. I remain an optimist. Still, first 6 months of this year are awesome. Remaining 6 have not been so great, but we still have Chocolatito Estrada 3. There's still Zerto versus Bivol. There's still some other bangers on the list coming up. But boxing needs these big fights to happen. They need a Spence Crawford. They need a Fury Joshua. They need the heavyweight division to fall fight each other. They need Ryan Garcia to fight Gervonta. They need Haney to fight Shakur or Tank or Lomachenko. These are very important. You need 3 or 4 big fights a year. Then you supplement them with the smaller fights for the hardcores. That is how a healthy boxing would run. If I was commissioner, if I was president of boxing, that's what would happen. That's what we need. So there it is. Terence Crawford, Errol Spence. Doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. Go ahead, put the blame on Crawford. Go ahead, put the blame on Spence and the PBC. Great. I guess we'll add another W to Errol Spence's box rec because he won this negotiation. He won this the public perception of why this fight wasn't made. That's how sad it is. That's what it means to me. That's who the blame is on. To me, the blame is on everyone involved. Because 20 years from now, you're not going to remember any of this. You're going to remember that the fight wasn't made, and it's a damn shame. Thank you for listening and watching this. Subscribe to Inside Boxing Live on YouTube. We're back next week with a new podcast with Chris Algieri talking all about this. Thank you, everyone.